Hello everyone. So, welcome to part 1 of our R course, which is just some introductory notes on what to expect and how to approach the course. So, this is the kind of course that intends for you to get very good at R. So, it's for people that really want to master R, to feel at home in the language. And it's particularly going to be a bit swung towards bioinformatics, just because that's my background, that's where I come from, but it should be suitable for anyone who really does want to take that journey. So, as such, it's structured as a guide to learn R, as opposed to courses that are more of a video manual for the language. What do I mean by that? The structure is going to be didactic. So the ideas are designed to flow from one to the other, to flow together for the sake of your making mental connections, to keep things stimulating and interesting, which will retain your focus. And ultimately, it's to build conceptual understanding. So there aren't going to be sort of strict modules which say, you know, this is how you do this component of the language. If you want to learn vectors, go here. If you want to learn linear models, go there, and we'll cover everything the language does. With those, of course, there will be introductions for each of those parts that you could re-listen to just to remember the basics. But you will, for example, if there's a section where you learn how to use vectors, the basics, you will continue to learn how to use vectors 5 videos into the future at a more and more advanced and more interesting level, so that you take that concept and solidify it, and also learn how people who are experienced in the language use them to their best effect. So we start with fairly basic principles, at least as far as the R language is concerned, but you'll need these rudimentary ideas to ultimately use R optimally. You might find if you're a casual user of R, or a person who uses R out of necessity because, you know, you've had some data set and you've wanted to run some particular analysis on it or produce some plot or something like that, and you've used a lot of ChatGPT and Googling and Stack Overflow and things to get done the thing you need to get done. You know, and you'll probably recognize and know a lot of these basic ideas, but I promise you'll almost certainly learn some new things, and you'll think, I'd never thought about that before, and that's interesting, that's more powerful than I thought, or that's how that works. So you'll absolutely be worth following along in these early stages anyway. Now, we try not to rely on packages very much at all, not in a purist way. We allow ourselves to use packages where they're totally necessary. The trick is that while you're learning, if you want to learn in this way where you're intending to be a master of the language, they can become black boxes that stop you from learning things that you will need to know if you're going to become the person that writes those kinds of packages. So it's a good rule of thumb to just resist a little. That said, there are different paradigms of writing R. This is sort of the basic principles of how you write your code. R has things, you know, you can Google object orientation and other features like that fundamentally change the way you just do your basic work in R. And we are going to aim towards one of those. Like I said, this intends for you to get good, and it's probably going to have a bioinformatics spin because that's where I come from. So this will be particularly applicable to people who want to work either on bioinformatics or any other source of really big data. So the paradigm that we aim at is going to be compatible with that. It's called data table, data.table. It's named after a package called data table, and it is an optimal way to express complex ideas extremely concisely, very elegantly, with a very small amount of code, and most importantly, it is incredibly highly optimized for speed, which is what you need when you're working with data that aren't just 50 rows, you know, one per observation, and because you've been counting the number of trees in a forest or something like that. This is when you want to work with data where you've got 2 billion rows sometimes. So this would be in contrast, I think, to other paradigms, and the most popular one, if you're a casual user so far, you will have come across packages from the tidyverse paradigm, which is probably the most popular R paradigm out there. It's the one that comes up when you ask ChatGPT or you ask Google for solutions. You'll see a lot of functions from for example, the plyr package, select, mutate, those kinds of things. These enjoy an advantage, partly because they're absolutely brilliantly easy to understand and elegant to write in, partly also because they are developed by the same team that develops R and RStudio, so they have a bit of an advantage as far as their reach goes. So, but we're heading towards the data table camp. Do not worry if you are working in an environment where people expect you to be able to write in the tidyverse paradigm. It will be a cinch for you to pick that up later. We may even cover that in a future video. So, lastly, we have some advice for how to learn. If you intend to get really good at this thing, then you've committed a bit to putting in this energy, so you have to take control of your learning and see yourself as the owner of a brain into which you are going to confer a lot of knowledge, a lot of intuition, a lot of experience, and you have to take control of how best to do that with yourself. So here are just a few little tips to follow to make things easy. Number one is that you have to go and type all the commands and things I show you yourself at some point. If you're anything like me, you love to listen to tutorials, and I do it when I'm taking my son for a walk in the stroller because he's a baby, or when I'm going on the exercise bike or doing the gardening, and I'll listen to the tutorial like that. But at some point, you have to go and sit down and write the commands. Don't write them exactly as I write them. Change things, mess around with them, break them, change a comma here, change the variable names, try new things, reinvent wheels, playing with your code. Play is the fundamental word here, and I really mean play. If you find yourself at a moment that we often do when we're learning new things, especially in programming, where you think, this new thing that Tim just taught me, I think that actually I could use that to run a simulation that I've always been interested in, or I could use that to analyze my data in a way that I'd always wondered about, but I didn't know it could be done. And I think if I apply those things, I could get that done. So don't feel like, that would be a distraction. Keep following the course. No, go follow that instinct. Even if it takes all day, you may end up writing some completely scrappy code that later you're embarrassed about, and it might even work. But those are the moments when you get sucked into what is the core of the process of learning, which is you are mentally engaging, making connections, experimenting things, learning by trying. Allow yourself down that rabbit hole. It's not wasting time. It's the most fundamental part of your learning. Now, I had some points written down about AI, which I put in quote marks because apparently we call everything AI now. So I'm talking about sort of chatbots and those kinds of things. I don't actually think it's really useful for me to go and spell out the optimal way to use them for your learning, because I would think someone who wants or will engage with a course like this already knows when they're using it constructively and when they're not. So just be conscious. We all have to do this. I have to do it too. You know when it is that you're using it as this wonderful on-demand tutor who has, infinite access to the manual, is extremely quick and well expressed, and only lies about 10% of the time, or produces absolute rubbish. So that's still that's competitive with human tutors. That's a very good thing to have in your pocket. But you also know when you've used it because you've run out of energy on a problem, and you sort of ask it how you would solve that, and then you read what it's written back, and you go, oh yeah, okay, I would have got there. That's pretty good. Next thing, but you haven't got that, and you know it. So just don't lie to yourself. And again, I know that we do this because I do that too. So that's it. That's the advice. That's what you're in for. I hope you are excited about joining me on the journey to learn R. I'm Dr. Mark Timothy Rabanus-Wallace, and I'm very grateful to the University of Melbourne who support me while I do these kinds of things. Let's get on to another video and start writing some code.